Welcome back to the deep dive. You know how this works. We get a fascinating source from one of you listeners, and we go deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we take a deep dive.
Yeah, into whatever that is. And today's deep dive is taking us to Sudan. We're looking at Madarij alsession, a novel by Mohamed Telboo.
It came out in 2021.
Yeah, 2021, so pretty recent. And it looks like it's going to be a really interesting journey. This book weaves together village life, the energy of the city, and there's even a little bit of magical realism sprinkled in there.
Yeah, there's so many layers to this one.
Yeah, I'm excited to get started. Where do we begin?
Well, let's start in the village of Davuk. Davuk is kind of a tranquil place. Life moves at a slower pace there. And that's where we meet Elquin Baki.
Okay.
Elquin is a devout and very respected figure in the village.
So like a community leader?
Yes, very much so. And he's also very connected to the spiritual realm.
Okay, that's interesting. How do we see that in the story?
Right away, we see it through a dream that he has.
A dream? Oh, I love dreams in stories. They're always so symbolic. What does Al-Qawan dream about?
So he dreams of the village transforming. It's really unsettling the way Telbo describes it. Objects move as if they have a life of their own, and then there's this young boy dressed in blue playing a very haunting melody on a horn.
Wow, that's powerful imagery.
Yeah, and it really stays with Al-Qawan. It's not just a fleeting dream. It feels like a premonition.
Yeah, especially because right after that, Al-Qawan finally has a son after having 6 daughters.
Yes, his son Mehdi. And there's so much celebration, but there's this underlying sense of unease around Mehdi's arrival, particularly from Al-Qawan.
So it's like the dream foreshadows something about his son, maybe.
It's definitely possible.
Right.
It makes you wonder, is this unease stemming from that dream, or is there something more to it?
Right. That's an interesting question that we should definitely keep in mind as we go deeper into this story. So tell me about Mehdi. What's he like?
Mehdi is completely different from his father. Imagine a child just full of life. Yeah. He's mischievous. He loves to dance and sing.
So of a free spirit.
Absolutely. He brings so much joy to the village, but it's almost like his carefree nature clashes with his father's very serious demeanor.
Right. That's a really interesting contrast. I mean, we've only just started talking about this book, and I can already sense that there's going to be this tension between, tradition and individuality.
Yeah, definitely.
In our prep notes, you mentioned the paths. I'm curious what those are.
Ah, yes, the paths. They're really important in Dafuk. It's the spiritual journey that the young men in the village undertake.
Oh, so it's like a coming-of-age tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're guided by sheiks who teach them the ways of the Quran and asceticism.
Asceticism.
Yeah, it emphasizes self-discipline and devotion. So the paths really represent this deeply ingrained way of life in the village.
It sounds like something that would be expected of Mehdi, given his age. But I wonder if he'll actually follow that path.
Yeah.
Given his personality and his father's unease.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And then there's the story of Mehdi's grandfather.
Al-May, right?
Yes, Al-May. He was a sheikh too.
I read he had almost like a legendary status in the village.
He did. He was revered for his wisdom and his defiance against the French colonial authorities.
Really?
Yeah. It's fascinating. There are all these tales of his miraculous powers, and then his eventual disappearance is shrouded in mystery.
Wow. So he embodies a different kind of path almost.
It's like he followed a path less defined by tradition and more by a connection to something bigger than himself.
It makes you think about the different ways that people find their own paths.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have Al-Qawan, who is so devoted to tradition. And we have Mehdi, who seems to be a little bit more of a free spirit. And then there's this legacy of Al-May, the grandfather, who kind of charted his own course. It's all very intriguing.
It is. And then there's this incident with a snake bite that happens.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
It really shifts the dynamic between Mehdi and his father. So another young boy, Adam, is bitten by a snake, and he accuses Mehdi of being responsible.
Oh, wow.
Now, we as readers, we don't know for sure if Mehdi actually did it.
Okay. But it really deepens Al-Qawan's distrust of his son.
It's almost like the snake bite becomes like a symbol of all of his anxieties about Mehdi.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it. And so instead of confronting Mehdi directly, Al-Qawan decides to send him away.
He sends his son away.
Yeah, to find a Quranic school, a place where he can receive a stricter, more traditional education.
So Mehdi is being pushed toward those traditional paths we talked about.
Exactly. It's like Al-Qawan is trying to control his son's destiny.
And to escape his own fears as well.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And so Mehdi leaves the village. He leaves everything he knows behind.
And that takes us to the city.
Yes, the city. The energy of the city is so different from the quiet rhythms of village life.
It feels like a turning point in the story.
It is. It's where we meet Zainab,
Okay.
And we get to experience the city through her eyes.
So it's completely a different setting. A whole new world.
It is.
I'm ready.
Take us there.
Okay, so picture yourself in Burham. It's the main marketplace in the city. And it is bustling. It's teeming with life. There are Arab traders, nomadic herders, people from all walks of life.
Wow. It sounds almost overwhelming.
It's vibrant, it's full of energy, it's harvest season, so there's a sense of abundance and celebration in the air.
Okay, but I imagine there's also another side to the city, right?
You're right. Beneath that surface of abundance, we also see the reality of poverty and homelessness.
Right. I guess that's true of many cities.
It is. And that's where we meet Zainab.
Okay.
She's navigating the complexities of city life, struggling to find her place.
What are some of the challenges that she faces?
Well, Zainab's journey is intertwined with a place called the Lair.
The lair. What is that?
It's a hidden world within the city.
Oh.
It's a place of refuge, but it's also very dangerous. It's where exploitation and violence are part of everyday life.
The place of contradictions.
Definitely, Zainab gets caught in this web of circumstances, forced to make difficult choices to survive.
It sounds like a very precarious situation. And is there someone who controls the lair?
There is. His name is Abbas. Yeah. He's a shadowy figure. He manipulates people. He preys on the vulnerable.
So he represents a darker side of the city.
Very much so.
Okay, so we have Al-Qawan, the devout father, seeking control. We have Maddie, the spirited son, sent away. And now we have Zainab caught in the clutches of this exploitative world. And it's all starting to come together.
It is. And, you know, in our prep notes, you mentioned something called the incident at the heart of the city.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Tell me about that.
Well, it's this pivotal event, but it's shrouded in mystery. We don't know exactly what happened, but it casts a shadow over the city. You know, people are uneasy. They're wondering what really transpired.
So it's like a source of anxiety and uncertainty.
Yes. And it kind of hangs over everything else that's happening in the story.
Wow, this is already so captivating. We have this traditional village. We have the city with its hidden darkness. And we have these characters whose lives are starting to intersect. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Me either.
This is going to be good.
It is.
I can feel it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so we're back in the city with Alcuin and Methi. And, you know, it's interesting because Alcuin sent Mehdi away to escape this false accusation, right? But now they've arrived in a city that's actually dealing with a real threat, like a serial killer. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
No, it is. There's definitely this sense of irony, you know, like, can we ever really escape darkness, or does it just take different forms, you know?
And amidst all that, we have Mehdi, who was sent to the city to, like, find this truer path or whatever. But I feel like knowing Mehdi, he's going to be shaped more by the city itself than by, you know, any formal education.
I think you might be right. I mean, remember back in the village how much he loved music and dancing.
Yeah, he was such a free spirit.
And his father tried to kind of suppress that, you know, that with all that strictness.
Yeah.
Maybe this city will actually give him a chance to really discover himself.
Yeah, maybe. Speaking of discovering oneself, we left Zainab in a pretty tough spot, remember?
Oh, yeah. The Lair.
Right, the lair. It's a
Well.
scary place, and I'm really worried about her. What happens to her?
Zainab is a fascinating character. You know, she has this quiet strength about her. She's really resilient.
But how does she even survive in a place like that?
It's not easy, but she finds ways to hold on to hope. She actually forms bonds with the other women there.
So she finds strength in community.
Exactly. And it's really powerful to see how these women support each other, you know, despite all the hardship.
It's inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Do these connections help her find a way out of the lair?
Well, she starts to gather information.
Yeah.
You know, she's trying to find a way to expose Abbas and his whole operation.
It's like she's playing this dangerous game.
She is, and she's using her intelligence to try to outmaneuver him.
It reminds me of what we were saying about Mehdi.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the city can be a catalyst for growth, you know, even though it's so dangerous.
Totally. Both Mehdi and Zainab are in situations where they have to fight for their own agency.
Right. And then there's Jin. The Jin, I'm so curious about him. He's this really mysterious character.
Yeah.
You know, capable of good and bad, and we never know what he's going to do next.
Jen is like a wild card. He pops up at different points in the story, offering advice or interfering in some way, but his motives are always a mystery.
It's like he embodies the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, all those things we can't control or predict.
I think that's a great way to put it. And his presence adds this element of magical realism to the novel.
I love how this book is weaving together all these different threads.
Yeah.
You know, you have these individual characters who are trying to survive, and you have this city that's struggling with its own darkness, and then you have this supernatural being lurking in the shadows.
And as the story unfolds, we start to see the city itself as a character almost.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a microcosm of Sudanese society.
Right.
you know? And we see this clash between tradition and modernity.
Right. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
How do you see that clash playing out with Alcoin and Medi?
So Alcon is very much rooted in tradition, you know, the traditions of his village. But the city is so different, and he's really struggling to adapt to it. He's clinging to the familiar, trying to impose order, but the city is chaotic, and it challenges his worldview.
Yeah, it makes me think about how a lot of people feel in the modern world. You know, like, things are changing so fast, and it can be hard to keep up.
Absolutely. And then there's Medi. He's actually drawn to the city's energy. It's like he sees a chance to break free from his father's expectations.
He's looking for his own gath.
Yeah, maybe a path that's different from the one his father has envisioned for him. And, you know, Zainab's journey is also about finding your own agency in a world that's trying to control you.
She's such a strong character.
She is. And she really embodies the city in a lot of ways. She's tough, she's resourceful, and she's constantly adapting to survive.
I love that all these characters reflect the city's complexity. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just black and white. It's full of contradictions and nuances.
And that's what makes Madarij so compelling. You know, it's a story about what it means to be human, to struggle, to adapt, to find meaning in a world that's constantly changing.
I'm really enjoying this deep dive.
Me too.
We're getting close to the end of Madarij alsession now, and I'm so curious to see how everything wraps up. You know, we followed these characters through so much.
I know, and this book, it doesn't really give us like clear-cut endings, you know?
Right.
It's more about how these characters deal with the consequences of their choices and find their own versions of peace.
Yeah, I like that. It's more realistic, I think.
Yeah.
So where do we start with wrapping this up?
Yeah.
What about Medi? Does he ever find that spiritual education his father was so determined for him to have?
Well, remember how Medi was always drawn to music and dance back in the village?
Yeah.
And how his father saw those things as distractions?
Right.
Well, in the city, Medi discovers this talent for calligraphy.
Calligraphy.
Yeah, the art of beautiful writing. It's like he finds this different way to connect with the divine, you know?
Through art.
Exactly. It's not the rigid path his father had in mind, but it's a path that lets Medi honor his heritage while expressing himself.
I love that. It's such a beautiful way to bring those two things together. You know, tradition and individuality.
It is, and it gives Medi a sense of purpose, too. He even starts using his calligraphy to help others in the city.
Really? How does he do that?
Well, he writes letters and documents for people who can't read or write themselves.
Oh, that's so kind.
It is. It's a really beautiful way for him to use his skills to connect with his community.
I love that. So he's kind of bridging the gap between that traditional world he came from and this new life in the city. And what about Zainab? We left her trying to escape from the lair. Did she make it out?
Things get pretty intense for Zainab. She ends up confronting Abbas using everything she's learned to outsmart him.
So she's fighting back.
She is. It's a really powerful moment. You see how brave she is, even though the odds are stacked against her?
So she escapes.
The ending is a bit ambiguous. We see her leaving the lair, heading back into the city.
Okay.
But we don't know what happens to her after that. There's this feeling that she's free, but also that she's still carrying the weight of her experiences.
Right. Like she can't just erase the past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But she's found a way to reclaim her agency, and that's a huge step.
It is. And what about Jin? That mysterious Jin. What's his role in all of this?
Jen is still a mystery until the very end. He shows up at these key moments, you know, offering cryptic advice or interfering in ways we don't expect.
It's like he's testing them.
Maybe. Or maybe he sees something in them, you know, something special, something worth fighting for.
It makes you wonder about his motivations, right? Like, why is he so invested in these characters?
We never get a clear answer, and I think that's okay. It adds to the mystery. It makes us think about those forces beyond our understanding.
It's a good reminder that we don't always have all the answers. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways from Madarij alsession? What did you learn from this book?
I think it's a story about resilience, you know, about finding your voice and your own path, even when the world is trying to tell you who you should be.
It's about defying expectations, right? And finding hope, even in the darkest of places.
Exactly. And it's a beautiful exploration of Sudanese culture and the challenges of navigating a world that's changing so rapidly.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about Sudan and about storytelling.
Me too. I always love these deep dives.
And I hope our listeners will be inspired to check out Madarij alsession for themselves. It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it.
It really will. And you know, maybe it will even inspire you to look at your own life with a little more curiosity and wonder, to see the hidden stories all around you.
I love that. Well, thank you for joining us on this journey, and until